and I am honored to be your host in this webinar, which is one of many that we have hosted, and many more that we will be hosting this year. Now, as you may have seen, the topic of our webinar is Unpacking Successes of the Government of National Unity in Enhancing Good Governance and Accountability. Following the formation of the Government of National Unity, or better known as the GNU, there has been significant public and academic interest in its performance, particularly its core promises of enhancing good governance and accountability. So this webinar aims to critically assess the successes and challenges faced by the GNU in these crucial areas. The discussion will delve into the GNU policies and actions, especially on transparency, ethical leadership, and public trust. Now, before I introduce my distinguished panel, let me say a few words about Regenesys education. Regenesys was founded about 25 years ago, actually, as a post-apartheid private higher education institution by three young idealists at the time. And these were Dr. Marcus Ravanya, who is our chairman, Dr. Penny Lowe, and Dr. William Vivian, who are our directors. The School of Public Management is one of several schools at Regenesys, which include the Business School, the Law School, School of Technology, School of Accounting, School of Education, and Digital Regenesys. So currently, Regenesys has a footprint across Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and we are moving into Zambia and Zimbabwe, and we are also in India as well as in the USA, developing there. Regenesys in Stanton is the accredited site for provision of higher education, and then the other outposts are basically tuition support and marketing offices. Having said that, it is now my honor and privilege to introduce our panel, and I will do that in no particular order. And I will start with Ms. Tara Roos. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Tara. Okay, so Ms. Roos is a political analyst and parliamentary correspondent with Business Day. She's known for her insightful commentary on South African politics, governance, and youth policy. A graduate of the University of Cape Town, or UCT, she's also a recognized thought leader and activist, serving as director of policy at So We Vote, and founder of the Participation Project, a youth-led initiative enhancing democratic engagement. Tara is a United Nations Young Ambassador for Education and was named one of Mail and Guardian's top 200 young South Africans. Her work consistently champions climate justice, gender equality, and youth empowerment, making her a leading voice in the intersection of policy, politics, and civic participation. Welcome, Tara. And then I've got Mr. Kashif Wickham, spelled W-I-C-O-M-B. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, legal professional, and business leader, currently serving as Chief Executive Officer of Adenco Electrical Construction, one of South Africa's leading privately owned electrical infrastructure firms. With over a decade of executive leadership experience, he also heads Merdeka Power and serves as a presidential counselor on South Africa's broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Advisory Council. Kashif is a founder and president of the Progressive Professionals Forum and serves on several boards, including the Western Cape Economic Development Partnership and Common Purpose. Known for transforming startups into sustainable enterprises, he brings deep expertise in strategic management, public policy, and empowerment, with a particular passion for fostering socially conscious entrepreneurship. He's a respected voice in South Africa's economic discourse, having hosted a business radio show for 10 years and currently appearing as a contributor on SABC's Espresso Breakfast Show. Welcome, Kashif.
Thank you.
And finally, last but not least, I have Mr. Phumlani Majozi. Mr. Majozi is a renowned political economist, global speaker, and author of the acclaimed book, Lessons from Past Heroes. With deep expertise in South Africa's political economy, he advises international investors and serves on the boards of the Chartered Institute of Business Accountants and Social Research Foundation. A regular columnist for Politics Web, Phumlani's writing on economics and governance have also featured in Business Day, City Press, and News 24, as well as Biz News. He has spoken at high-profile events across South Africa, the USA, Europe, and Africa, and his commentary has been featured by global outlets including BBC News, BBC World News, Time Magazine, and Al Jazeera. Recognized by Advanced Media as one of the 100 most influential young South Africans, Phumlani continues to shape public discourse with sharp insight and a commitment to ethical leadership. So we've got a panel of luminaries here, and we are looking forward to a wonderful webinar. Unfortunately, one of our panel members is not able to be with us because of a family bereavement. So to Mr. Ivo Chepkin, our thoughts are with you at this difficult time, and we hope that everything goes well. So without further ado, let me get on with our discussion. Tara, I have an eye for you. so just to forewarn you, before I ask my question, I just want to say, I think it's a day or two ago, I was checking something on my phone, Facebook, and you get all these video clips that come up. And there was a video clip of Mr. Malema of EFF, and he was saying that all parties in the GNU must take responsibility for decisions that have been made with their participation. And then came Mr. Mbalula, Secretary General ANC, and he says, I was saying that the government will not hesitate to expel any party that does not support the decisions made by the GNU. And he said that includes the DA. Now, then flashed Ms. Ellen Zil, DA, and she said that her party would not hesitate to leave the GNU if things continue the way they are. So one sees signs of escalating tension there. So my question to you, from your privileged position as a political analyst and parliamentary correspondent, how has the GNU managed internal political disagreements while maintaining accountability to the public?
Well, I think for many South Africans, they're extremely frustrated by where we find ourselves with the GNU currently. We've seen a lot of what should be internal political fights happen in the public domain. we often hear the critique that the DA is still acting like the opposition while being in a coalition with the ANC. But South Africa is very new to coalition politics, and like a young married couple, they're going to fight, unfortunately. But I think one of the biggest points of contention within the GNU currently is that they do not have any mechanisms for redress. I mean, we see statements being made by party leaders, Fikile Mbalula and Helen Zille, both while holding senior positions in their party, do not form part of the government. We see many actions being taken by the president, by John Regenesys, and as leader of the DA and the second largest party, that is not outlined in the statement of intent. The statement of intent has not been followed. And I think internally within the GNU, they have not figured out how they are going to sort out their internal disputes. I think for both the ANC and the DA, there's this push and pull, whereas neither of them want to leave the GNU. They want the GNU to continue and to succeed, but they don't know how to sort out their own internal problems. And we, unfortunately, as the South African public, are watching the fallout of this happen in real time. And that does take a toll on the public. I think while many South Africans at large are disillusioned with politics, for many South Africans, they read a headline and they're like, they don't care. They simply do not care for the internal workings of the GNU. They just want to know if the GNU is going to stand. And I think that is very disheartening. I mean, often we talk about an economics perspective. We look at how the rand is fluctuating. We look at how the markets are reacting. But I do think this is going to take an emotional toll on the South African voter base. And I do think it will be very interesting to test and see and use local government as a litmus test to how the country is reacting to the GNU and all the drama that comes along with it.
Thanks for that. So you believe that neither of them want to leave the GNU?
I don't think either, nor the DA nor the ANC. And I think for the DA, they're saying, you know what, if they want us gone, they should kick us out, because I think for the DA, that would be the best media narrative for them to spin, is that, we tried to make governing work and we were there for the national interests of the country, and the ANC couldn't come to the table and they kick them out. I think the ANC also, they don't want to kick the DA out. And so they're saying, you know what, if they're not willing to cooperate and to come to the table as all, and the ANC does and is able to use all the other 8 political parties in the GNU as the bargaining chip to say, if the DA wants to be the outlier, not come to the table and agree to these terms of reference for whatever issue as the other 8 political parties, then they must leave. But I'm a firm believer that if the ANC wanted the DA gone, they would have kicked them out already. So as much as I think Fikile Mbalula can make many grand-pierced statements, I do think that they also want the DA there, and the DA also wants the ANC, and it's just one big marriage of convenience until 2029.
Oh, great. Before I move on, what do you say about this in the recent visit by President Ramaphosa with his entourage, to the USA for a meeting with President Trump? The leader of the DA actually, said that the reason why they are within the GNU, Government of National Unity, is because they want to keep out the going to overseas way and also the EFF. Is that honest or just being disingenuous?
I think that is a politically convenient narrative for the DA to spin. I mean, they often talk about this doomsday coalition. The reality is that if the ANC wanted to be in a coalition with the EFF, they would have been. They would have picked the EFF had we come out of the election period, in that negotiation period. They would have gone with the EFF. It is my personal belief that I don't think that under the current Cyril Ramaphosa administration that ever going into a coalition with MK was ever going to be a reality. Could be a different story when the ANC elects a new president. But if they wanted the EFF, they would have chosen the EFF. I mean, when we saw by budget 2.0, by budget 3.0, if the ANC wanted the EFF, it would have been the EFF. I just think it is a politically convenient narrative to talk about the doomsday coalition. If anything, if the government had to fall, the ANC would likely go into a minority government. I do think that they wouldn't want to risk a 13-party coalition with Action SA and Build on South Africa, where they have a 201 majority exactly. So I do think that that is just a media narrative that the DA is spinning currently.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you shortly, but I do have a question now for Mr. Majosi. So, Mr. Majosi, speak to us from your observation as economist. What role does civil society play in holding the GNU accountable? And has this role been supported or restricted?
You mean how people hold how people in society hold the government accountable?
Yes, especially civil society.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great. Thank you so much, Prof. And it's wonderful to be here. It's great panelists that I respect. Just one thing I want to, just before I move to answering your question, just one comment on what Tara was saying.
Okay.
One of the reasons why, and I think it's the main sort of reason why these two main parties, the ANC or the DA, they don't want to be responsible for the collapse of the coalition government, or they don't want to leave voluntarily. It's because according to the polling data, the DA actually, it polls better now, given that it's part of the government of national unity than before. That's what the recent numbers when it comes to polling in the recent months have shown. In fact, both the DA and the ANC, they are polling better. So that's one element as to why they are not, they don't want to just voluntarily let go of the coalition government. Another very interesting statistic is that the majority of South Africans, they do believe that the GNU, as it is positive for the country. Again, that's according to the data by the Social Research Foundation, by the Institute of Race Relations, plus 50% of South Africans, they think positively of the GNU. So none of these parties want to be responsible for letting go of this GNU because, well, as Tara was saying, the narrative will be that, well, you collapsed something that, the majority of South Africans were in favor of. So there are those dynamics in play. But I must stress here that what also complicated the GNU, and Tara is right that they haven't reached a point where really they are being effective because of different, the way they see things at this point. It's because I think the 9-10 party coalition was not really a good idea. It works better if the numbers were much smaller. Maybe 2 or 3 parties in the coalition government. 2, I believe, would have been much better at the time than having 10 parties, being in a coalition government. That created many complexities over the past year, and I think that is a contributor that gets us to a state where we are not really seeing that effectiveness in terms of coordinating policy and coming up with something that both parties, they can agree upon. Now, to come to your question, Professor, around what role can we play in terms of pushing for accountability as society, as civil society, it's very important to highlight that when you look at democracies around the world, especially in the developing world, South Africa is one of those countries where we have a vibrant civil society, right? We are amongst, I was looking at another data by the Economist magazine just not long time ago, where they were saying we're looking at the state of democracy in Africa, right? And one of the very important points they highlighted there was that South Africa's democracy in sub-Saharan remains the most sort of stronger, advanced, in the sense that we do have vibrancy of them, of that activism from our civil society. We do have a vibrant media as well. You may disagree with some of the opinions of people in the media or the opinions of some media houses, but we do have a strong media in the country, and we still do have stronger political activism, right? We have many different parties. We can make an option as to who we vote for. So there is that strong democracy in our country, and I think that is positive. Now, within that context, given that we have a stronger democracy, I think that our civil society, I do believe that over the years, it's been doing well in terms of pushing very hard to hold the government accountable. And I do believe that over the past year of our GNU, I have seen many organizations in civil society pushing for reform, right? and calling for better governance. And I think with the GNU, it gives us more opportunities now, given that we're in a different phase than what we were prior May 2024. We do have more opportunities, especially for civil society, to play the role. Your question was, is civil society activism being constrained somehow or restrained?
Yes.
I don't think so, Professor. I think that there are many things that are taking place that are in the positive direction for civil society.
Right. I have to put on my academic cap now and ask a question. Normally, we tell our students that you need to be clear about definitions of concepts and so on. And I see you've spoken about coalition, while we also talk about the government of national unity. Would you like to just tell us what the difference between the two is, coalition and government of national unity, if there's any?
Well, for me, to be frank with you, Prof, I've seen it as basically, this is called government of national unity, but yes. I thought that was done for political reasons, right? Because the NC, they were avoiding to be seen as calling it a coalition, a government. Yes. Wanted to sort of go back to the 1990s and say, this is a sort of, we are uniting and forming one government. We are coming together as a people to form a government of national unity. But I think that in realistic terms, it is a coalition government of course, about 9-10 parties.
Okay. Tara, I see you're smiling there. Would you like to say something? Tara?
I absolutely agree. I do think that we could state that this is a coalition, not a government of national unity. We've seen very little unity between the ANC and the DA thus far. And I think, particularly when you look at the position of other political parties, with the exception of the Freedom Plus, who only on certain issues has sided with the DA, we see very little from other political parties expressing their own opinions on certain policy issues. They always just side with the ANC and kind of almost form this mentality that, it's us versus the DA within the GNU trying to govern the country. And I think that could be very damaging for certain political parties in still trying to maintain and hold their own political identity while operating within the GNU, especially looking at the smaller political parties.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Tara. I do have a question for you, Mr. Whitcomb, but I'll come to you just shortly. I just want to push a little bit, and this is now again to Tara. From your vantage point as parliamentary correspondent, has the GNU enhanced the separation of powers among executive, legislature, and judiciary?
I think, if anything, we've seen a yield digression from the DA's strong opposition and very technocratic response they have had in Parliament as the official opposition to what we've seen as MK. I mean, just yesterday, with the appropriations, though, Chief Whip Colleen Makavele had made 2 errors during voting. One at vote 17 for the vote of health, which she had mistakenly said that MK supports the vote. And then again at the end, when it was the totality vote to adopt the appropriations bill. And thankfully, House Chair Frolic had allowed her to change her vote twice on the official record. I mean, it's just like simple errors like that when we look. Written questions is something that we also keep a fine eye on and monitor when looking at parliamentary corresponding. And the quality of the questions that are being asked is not the same. You do see the DA still almost fulfilling this opposition type role within government currently in an effort to hold the ANC accountable while governing with them. But it does make public perception really difficult for the DA because, we as public say you can come out and openly criticize this government, but yet you are still a part of it time and time again. And often I think with the DA almost going to court or threatening to leave, there is this public fatigue of criticism of the ANC coming from the DA. And I think there needs to be a lot more substantive criticism coming from MK, more specifically as the official opposition in the legislature.
Great. Thank you very much. This question I had for Mr. Chepkin, but now unfortunately he's not here with us. But I think, Mr. Majosi, you are a good candidate for this question.
Can I just come in here, Prof?
You want to come in? Okay, please go ahead.
The question that as the GNU enhanced the separation of powers amongst the executive, the legislature, and judiciary is based on the assumption that the GNU is the answer to all the country's problems. The separation of powers between the judiciary and the executive has always been there. If anything else, South Africa has got a firm and solid constitution, one of the best globally. And even during what some would call the 9 or 10 wasted years, there was a separation of powers between the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. Even in those years, those 9 wasted years, or the last 20 or 30 years of democracy, South Africans had the liberty and the freedom to say exactly what they wanted to say about even a president of the country. People could call former President Zuma a liar, a thief, and all other negative adjectives, justified or not, attached thereto, and did not have the fear of being picked up in the still of the night and thrown into a jail, unlike in what people call the most mature democracy globally, unlike in the USA, where you currently see voices of dissent, even from academics such as yourself, are being oppressed, are being stifled. And so we mustn't make as if the GNU is this miracle that has happened. South Africa as a country is a miracle in itself. Our transition to democracy is a miracle which is lauded globally. We had a coalition government in 1994 which saw to this transition. Like any democracy or like democracies or like countries, we went through our highs and our lows. We are sitting with the GNU, but the way we must ask this question and the way we must phrase our questions and the way we must respond mustn't be as if there's no GNU, we're sitting in a failed state.
Okay. Since you have jumped into the fray, Mr. Bitcom, I might as well ask you a question then. Now, the business community, both locally and internationally, was very happy when the government of national unity was formed. Among other things, they said it assured business that there would be policy consistency. Okay. As executive chairperson of the Presidential Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Advisory Council, it's quite a mouthful. How does the GNU ensure that financial management and procurement processes are transparent and equitable?
Look, I think that the one advantage of a coalition government with the GNU is that when cabinet sits on a Wednesday like they do, it's not in a closed room where one political party decides, okay, this one we'll keep under wraps, guys, and we leave you, we make like it doesn't exist. With the government of national unity, different political parties are in there, and like I said at the beginning, what the GNU is going to ensure greater transparency, which was your question. It's going to ensure greater accountability, and it's going to just ensure a race between who's the fastest and who's the best. Because when I leave this cabinet meeting and I can deliver passports faster than the previous Home Affairs Minister, it's a win for the people, it's a win for the country, but it's also a win for that particular minister who represents a particular political party, which is not the ANC or not the DA. So I think that is very, very positive. In terms of trade, when we speak about policy certainty, South Africa has drafted the best policies globally. We get 10 out of 10 for drafting policies. We get less than that for the implementation thereof. So our policies are not the issue. It's the implementation of the policies where we are coming across very weak. And why are we doing that? Because our technocrats, our chief directors, our director generals, we must appoint the best and the most competent from amongst us. They can represent whoever the particular party is that runs that department, because that's a given. But we must appoint the best amongst us, and that will then ensure, to answer your question, policy certainty. With regards to the issue of Black economic empowerment and its advisory council I serve on, Prof, I think for the first time in 30 years, my fellow compatriots, white South Africans, are seeing the benefits of Black economic empowerment and transformation. because South Africa is now more open to international partners. We're more open to global players coming in. And in order to have a protectionist policy around there must be local content. If you take Starlink, if you're going to come into a country, you must be able to fulfill these transformation agendas. Those transformation agendas don't only benefit the previously disadvantaged, it benefits South Africans in general. So the transformation policies of the state that we have is to advance the local economy, to advance black business, but at the same time advance white business. There's a 2% difference between a 51% black-owned business, 51 to 49. There's a 2% difference between me and my white compatriot. And if we come together, and if we work together, then those policies that you are referring to, then the economy will be insulated to some extent and will grow even further with regards to policy certainty.
I think this is an exciting topic, and thanks for the way you're handling it. I wonder if other panelists would like to maybe chip in. I don't want you to go thinking I wish I had said something. Yes.
Can I jump in, Prof, quite quickly?
Please.
So, Kashif raises a very important point around our policies. For me, as someone who looks at the economy quite closely, and I'm sure Kashif does as well, and maybe it's going to come to a different conclusion. When you look at South Africa is an underperformer when it comes to economic productivity, right? And we have seen that happening for the past plus 15 years now. How we underperform other emerging markets peers, it's very, very concerning. We've to give you a quick example, under the first term of President Ramaphosa, we grew at less than 1%, right? That's average economic growth. Compare that to our population growth that grows at about plus minus 1.5%. That tells you that basically we are getting poorer as a nation. So we are not growing well. It's been bad. Unemployment rates, the levels of joblessness in the country, they are very, very shocking, right? If we have plus 70% of youth unemployment, it's a very, very serious challenge. When you look at our fixed investment rate as a percentage of GDP, and fixed investment is basically businesses expanding, Professor, expanding their their businesses, building branches, it's been doing badly, right? We have about 15% as a percentage of GDP. That's fixed investment as a percentage of GDP. The countries that are growing at plus minus 4% in the emerging markets, they have a fixed investment rate as a percentage of GDP of in the north of 20%, Professor. So that means we would have to push that up by plus 5% for us to really grow our economy much better than what we are seeing right now, where basically we are getting poorer. And I do believe that the policies have had an impact in suppressing our economic growth, the regulatory environment, the labor market, policies. You could go on, right? These things have been lack of investment from the government and the private sector as well as a result of regulation. So we should be honest that yes, we may have what we see as good policies, but the fact is that the economic data tells us that the situation is not looking well for our people.
Among the audience out there listening to this webinar are actually some of our students, especially in our postgraduate programs like postgraduate diploma in public management and master of public management. And just last week we had a very lively discussion about the failures of implementation of policies in the public sector, especially. And I'm hoping that they are listening to this discussion because the kind of issues that you're covering are pretty much the kind of issues that were taxing our minds and debated when we talked the fact that we have probably some of the best documents on policy and so on, the best constitution, but somehow, somewhere, we don't seem to be able to execute. is one thing that keeps coming up. So I'm hoping that they are listening and that they are benefiting from this one. Now, Mr. Majosi, before we moved to Mr. Whitcomb, I had said I had a question for you, which I had kept for Mr. Chepkin. And that question has been partly answered, but I'll still put it to you. And the question was, has the GNU improved public trust in governance institutions? And if so, what would you say are some of the key indicators? You know, there is this concern that the public at some point begins to lose faith and trust in government institutions. Is there?
Well, Prof,
yes.
Yeah, Prof. Just look at what's been happening with in the police system. What we heard from Tlatlam Kwanazi from my province in KwaZulu-Natal, the general there, the police commissioner. That tells you, and you know, people have always held a view that our institutions aren't really doing a great job. And this one that we are seeing now with the SAPS, it's a grave concern, right? So I think that issue has raised distrust over our at least one of our very important institutions, and that is the police system. So that's an issue there, which happened, of course, over the past during the course of the GNU, and we can't say we blame the GNU for that. We can just see now as to what does the GNU does about such, you know, given that it is happening now. Are they taking the appropriate measures? There have been also concerns around the president and the expropriation law as to how he signed it last year. The fact that it didn't give enough time for other or for people around the country, whether it's in the form of members of parliament or civil society, to challenge it after he had signed it. So there was a concern around that. So you do have some organizations who are basically at this point trying to challenge the expropriation law. So that again raised that distrust amongst them, some elements within our society. So I would argue that there is that distrust at this point. But I think the main thing we should focus on, as all these things are emerging, is to how does the GNU respond, right? Yeah. And what we see after that, Professor, within a space of 12 months, 18 months, are we seeing serious changes taking place or a new direction when all that has been revealed?
Thanks very much. Kashif, did you have something to say?
No. I always say this, Prof, and I think that you had a previous question about the role of civil society.
Yes.
And this is now to our learned colleagues who are listening in, and to my fellow panelists. Solutions to unemployment, solutions to good corporate governance, solutions to transparency, solutions to the unemployment of 43% and so on. Those solutions don't only lie with the state alone, and doesn't certainly lie with the GNU alone. The weakness, the biggest mistake we made as a country, and the biggest mistake the African National Congress made when it took up power in 1994, was that it almost imploded civil society organizations. So the South African National Civics Organization, SANCO, the UDFs, etc., that they became no more, and so hence the public-private partnerships that we speak about now so easily disappeared. So the point I'm making is that the solutions to our problems and the questions that we have we mustn't find the answer only in what can the GNU do. We must ask, what can we do? As members, as somebody operating within the private sector, within my business, what am I doing within my own little circle of influence in order to advance the country's objectives and to address its challenges? And so I think that is one of the debates that we must have. Doesn't quite answer your question, but I think certainly something I want to challenge our listeners or the students here to pontificate and think about.
Just as a side question to the previous one. Should we be worried, or to what extent should we be concerned about the position that the United States of America is taking towards South Africa in general?
I think, and I'm going to end, because I'm with a bunch of academics, I can be a bit controversial, and I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
And it's a conspiracy theory. Or it's a theory. Not call it a conspiracy theory, it's a theory. I think we are witnessing a regime change by proxy happening within South Africa. I think it's in the interest of the conservative West to see a government of national unity in South Africa. I think and I believe that many of these voices that have come up, well-funded voices that have come up to put forward a particular agenda and to ask particular questions, are those that want South Africa not to succeed. I believe that the USA's particular interest in the small country deep in Africa, at the southernmost tip of Africa, where a senator can comment on the ANC leaders or leaders which are in our country, where that senator can speak about a white genocide happening within South Africa, which is obviously not true. I believe that there is an issue bigger than the reasons given. So when we speak about what is my view on the USA's position on South Africa, the question should be, why does the USA have a position on South Africa? What is it trying to achieve? Because if I try and justify and defend and deflect their position on South Africa, I'm not looking at the bigger picture or what the ultimate strategic objective is, and that should be the discussion.
Great. Tara, what's the picture from the corridors of power to this issue?
I think this is one of the issues where the DA and the ANC is extremely divided. I mean, their history on how to deal with South Africa-US relations, they have been on opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, currently we look at the distinction with ANC Secretary General coming out against DA spokesperson for international relations, Emma Powell. When we look at the DA's comments on Special Envoy Mcps Jones, when we look at the really distinction of how and polarizing how they are dealing with this issue, I think it's one of the many policy issues where they don't see eye to eye. I do think that John Steenhuisen's conduct in the White House paints a very different picture to how the DA internally as a party and their personal views on US-South Africa relations. And we see this distinction time and time again. I think the ministers inside cabinet have are placed in a very difficult position, whereas they need to act on behalf of the government and in their positions as ministers for the Republic of South Africa. But the DA is still serving as almost an opposition party, and they're still the second largest party, but they have different policy positions to the DA. So I think that there is a lot of contrast. How we deal with US-South Africa relations going forward, I think, is going to be dependent on two very key things. One, the filling of the post for previous Deputy Minister Andrew Whitfield in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, who will be very key in dealing with the fallout of AGOA and looking at how trade tariffs from the US specifically is going to affect the South African economy. And then secondly, and something that is also extremely important, is the issue around Starlink. When we look at how, specifically that being a DA Minister department, what is going to happen with ICASA and its regulations and the policy directive issued by Minister Sali Malatsi. And so I think those two key things will play and really shape US-South Africa relations within the next 6 months.
Right. I can't leave you out, Mr. Majosi, on this one. I'm sure you've got some insights that you'd like to share with us. Any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, well, it's a changing global politics world. And the situation between South Africa and the US, it's something that's been around for a while. It didn't really begin with Mr. Trump, who took over for his second term early this year. It's something that was growing, the concern over South Africa's foreign policy, at least from the Washington perspective. Of course, we can debate that, but it's something that predates Mr. Trump. And my honest view has been that this is an opportunity. I don't want to be too negative over this thing, right, Professor? Because I think at the end of the day, there are opportunities. We understand that there are negotiations going on right now for us to avoid the 30% tariff rate that will come effective next month on our goods that we sell in the US market. But I think where we are right now, it presents opportunities for us as well to look into how do we adjust our policy with respect to the US, because it's not just Trump. I don't believe that. It's beyond, it's a big segment of American society. We just need to find ways of finding a good trade deal and negotiate the concerns from both sides and try to find a good working relationship. Professor, I want the relationship with the US to work between South Africa and the US. And if these negotiations can go well, I want them to go well. I want us to remain in good relations with them, trading. We had a trade surplus with them. In other words, we were selling more goods to them than their goods coming into our market. And I think I want that to continue going forward.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who want to add to this? Or can I move on now to Tara? I want to ask you a question that I had for Mr. Whitcomb. What challenges does the GNU face in institutionalizing good governance across all levels of government?
I think a big issue that the GNU currently faces, it relates back to the policy differences they have, is both of them have different perspectives on what accountability mechanisms are. I think that the DA, coming from a very tactical and technocratic position, they're very big on opening up court cases, like going to the public protector, looking at the National Prosecuting Authority, using those mechanisms of redress within other governing bodies. Whereas I think when you look inside the ANC, they like to deal with things internally, specifically as it relates to party members. When we look at the disciplining of party members, they love to establish a commission of inquiry to investigate. There are many different mechanisms, I think, that both parties like to use and exercise. I think when we look specifically at the judiciary and prosecutory functions within South Africa, I think that it is very important that we do need to strengthen more specifically the MPA. When we look at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, I think that it's probably one of the most underperforming government departments currently. When we look at how the NPA has really failed to secure any prosecutions for state capture, I think that it's absolutely laughable. Shamila Batoy's tenure is coming to an end, and I do think that the DA would also want a really strong say in who the next public protector head of the NPA becomes. But I think that more specifically, when we look at the subsequent fallout and failure of the Zondo Commission at the tail end, at the back, that people who were named in the Zondo Commission they're now back in Parliament, not just specifically in reference to the MK party, but they are members of the ANC, who had also explicitly been named in state capture cases, and they're back. And I think that it is very disheartening for many South Africans across the board to see how openly, as a common South African, if you simply had to take a loaf of bread from a shop, you would be arrested. But you get a state official who could gut the state for millions of rands, and they could still be sitting in the halls of Parliament. And I think that it's very sad that those accountability mechanisms are currently lacking.
Right. Any one of our panel members wanting to chip in on that one? I think this whole idea of institutionalization, of good governance, to what extent are we doing that? Any other colleagues on the panel?
If I can come in, Prof.
Yes, please.
I think good governance is at a low and has been at a low. And so I think the question would be, why is that? And the answer, which I'm sure all of us will agree to, was the meddling by political appointees in the day-to-day operations of a particular department. I don't believe that it's the duty of a minister of any ministry to step into our department or wards or appoints a particular service provider or what it does, etc. And when we speak about the government of national unity, which is the focus, and we speak about corporate governance, at least there, the eyes and ears of civil society and a very robust civil society are on these departments because, of course, they are the national departments. But the biggest concern for me are the small rural municipalities where this happens, where a mayor will walk into a municipal manager's office and direct the municipal manager to give a tender to his brother, his friend, his comrade, whatever the case may be. Many of those cases have been made public, but as many as they are public, I think there are many thousands of others which are not. So when we speak about good corporate governance, we can go into legislation, we can go into police, but ultimately, what we as South Africans must ensure, and those that lead us and the political parties that we choose to vote for, they must ensure that the candidates that they put forward must be morally and ethically sound. Because once you've got that right, and you appoint that person, and he's morally and ethics, and he understands the responsibility that has been entrusted on him or her, then the issue of good corporate governance, I'd like to believe, will also almost be, even possibly, will be a self-policing exercise. And so that is, I think, what we need to do as a society and as those we have elected into power. Our morals and ethics have gone down the tube. Hence, so many of our elected leaders are stealing from right under our noses and are stealing from the poorest of the poor. So that would be one of my solutions, to bring morals and ethics back into politics. I know that some will say the two are completely juxtaposed to each other, but certainly we can try.
Yeah, we can try. I like that.
Yes,
We can try. Prof, let me just, one thing to add as well, as we speak of how we institutionalize governance, good governance. I mean, part of the problem that we face, I think this is overall as a democracy. I don't think it's just, it has to do with them, with this era of the GNU. I just think one of the things that we should have done, after when we picked, after 1994, was to try and empower communities, right? When it comes to the issues of governance, in terms of trying, communities to take charge of their fate as well, to hold their leaders accountable. And I think that also when you look at our municipalities, that Kashif has just touched on, the levels of debt there, Professor, they are massive, right? Municipalities, they are heavily indebted, right? You look at the administrative inflation, right? When it comes to taxes in municipalities, all kinds of taxes that government collects them, they are heavy, for residents. So I think that there are many issues that, as much as we have problems at municipal level, I just feel like also we should try and decentralize the way of governance in our country, to allow communities. Not everything should be run from Pretoria Union buildings, right? Or from the legislature in Cape Town. How do you decentralize so that communities, provincially, down to municipalities, how do you give them more power in terms of whether it's in education, it's in security matters, it's in policing and so on? How do you get them engaged and holding their leaders accountable at that level? I think that is very important. I think it would help in terms of improving our governance as well. Because so long as our people think that they are governed in the union buildings, they think that is very, very far. It's got nothing to do with my community. But if they know that change begins here in their communities, maybe that can help, improve governance.
Can I come in, Prof?
Yes, please go ahead.
We have a very robust public participation process. When I say me, I mean South Africa. Tara, who is a parliamentary liaison officer, will agree and attest that our portfolio committees on energy, finance, economic development, human settlements, the works, it's open to anybody to attend. and it's open for people to make submissions too. And I must say, I've attended many of these portfolio committees, and I've seen government work. I've seen how members of completely opposing political parties, if they've got a objective chairperson, they work together to achieve the interest of that particular portfolio committee. I've seen it work, so I find solace in that. And so the theatrics that happens in National Assembly is just there to gain votes, I suppose. But members of civil society and the representatives of civil society don't quite fully take advantage of the public participation process, where you can, in fact, alter a white paper or a green paper, a bill, by making a submission. And so back to Pumlani's point, civil society has lost its teeth, has delegated its thinking, has delegated its responsibility to the elected leaders, wrongfully so. And we should have an even more robust but more progressive civil society participating in the public participation processes to ensure that when these policies are drafted and then enacted into law, they represent the interests of the country at large and not a particular political party and its leadership.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm getting excited with this because it's the kind of things that we're trying to create awareness, in our students, especially, as I said, those who are postgraduate students, and they are very senior people from the public sector. We tell them about some of the graduate attributes that we would like them to take when they graduate from our institution. Like, for example, leading consciously and being ethical leaders, and also spiritual intelligence. Now, previously they were saying, "Oh, now you want to convert us to a certain, religious whatever." We said, no. Spiritual intelligence has to do with knowing what your purpose is, in life. Why are you in this world? Our chairman likes to say, you're not here just to eat, sleep, and procreate, and so on. You must have a deeper purpose, and it's your responsibility to find out, what is that purpose, and then to pursue that. And they seem to actually grasp that. But always they turn around and say, no, but you see, now you are talking to the converted. You should be talking to our superiors, because they're the ones who do things that make us sort of fail, to execute in terms of our mandate. And one of the things they talk about is, I think you mentioned at this point, that there is political interference. We know what the policies are, we know what the right thing to do is, but then you get political interference, and therefore you're not able to do the right things. And so, we get despondent. So I found this very interesting, and I hope our students are listening because this is what it's all about. I want to move on a little bit and ask again, Mr. Majosi, what lessons can future coalition governments or governments of national unity, what can they learn from the GNU regarding accountability and governance? Are there any lessons that future participants in coalitions or governments of national unity can learn from what we are seeing now?
I think, Prof, it will be easier to manage governance if you don't have 10 parties in a coalition government, or the government of national unity, as they call it. Yes. It presents many problems. Beyond the fact that's beyond another element, Professor, is that we're a country, we're a smaller economy in the emerging markets, a country of about 63 million people or so, and we really, our cabinet is massive, Professor. It's big, our cabinet. It could have been reduced, made smaller than what it is right now. It's costing taxpayers a lot of money. So I think that I hope that in future, whoever comes through to govern in the future, they learn that such a big, a cabinet is not what you need, especially in a country that has a very is a very small economy. So that's one thing to learn. But I also think that Tara touched on something very interesting, and that is, it's been more than a year later now. These people, they are really squabbling, right? They can't really find sort of one cohesive, policy. And the question is, and they did start something that they called, I think it's a clearing house. Tara will correct me if I'm something clearing house. When they disagree, that something gets cleared there. It doesn't seem to have worked, Professor. Even that clearing house where they aimed to clear disagreements. I just think that if the future generations can look into how do we make this thing as small as possible, of course, within the electoral sort of system circumstances, what is allowable, within our constitution. But I think that mindset is very, very important. Otherwise, then things are going to get complicated. It ends up being a finger pointing. No, it's you, it's not us, it's the other one. I think, and you opened with Malema, Professor, who says that they all should take, responsibility for whatever is happening in terms of governance. And guess what, Professor? I think Malema has a point. I really agree with him and his worldview, but it does have a point.
I hope he's listening.
Because it does have a point that they should all take accountability. They are supposed to come with debate whatever they are debating, come with a vision or whatever outcome they come up with, and say, this is what we agree upon, this is how we move forward. Not to come out of something and then take each other to courts. It doesn't work like that. So that would be my view.
Great, thank you very much. Clara, your name has been mentioned. What can you tell us about this clearinghouse, or whatever it is?
So a clearinghouse is meant to be, how do they deal with issues within the GNU? And this idea is that they needed to have relative consensus about an issue, but what is being defined as relative consensus, the GNU doesn't understand. For me, I think the biggest thing that the current GNU can teach future coalitions is we need to have a drafted and agreed upon statement of intent before any coalition is formed. Because of the South African law, following an election, look, they only have 30 days to form a government, and that is not a lot of time. I do think that there were many delays, and I think that was also part of the ANC's negotiation tactics. Because I mean, they might have lost the election rather, but I think they won the negotiation war in terms of managing to retain key ministries and looking at proportionally how many ministries the DA had received in relation to the ANC and other political parties. So I think it was really important for the ANC, and that was used as a big negotiation tactic. I think that a agreed upon statement of intent is extremely important. Even going into local government elections come 2026, I think that we will see a lot more local government coalitions. And I think it is really important to look at how local coalitions will affect national coalitions, will affect provincial coalitions, and what the basis of understanding for all future national coalitions will be, and how that will affect things like parliament, departments, and the allocation of certain ministries. And I think that is the most important thing that has come out of this GNU currently.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone wants to follow up on that.
Just one thing also to mention, Professor, and I don't want us to, because I'm sure some people are going to say, these guys, they can be so negative. I think it's very important to understand that so far, in a year later, there is still a positive sentiment toward the GNU. And my view is that gives these guys who are politicians an opportunity to get things right. Because South Africans, as I cited some stats earlier, that they still see the GNU as positive. Even when you look at the macroeconomic indicators, the market sentiment, the investors, still positive on the GNU. Our stock market is up 20% this year. We've seen inflation going down over the past year. Fuel prices going down, the interest rates as well going down. So there are opportunities, Professor. So if our GNU leaders can exploit that opportunity, then we take off.
Great, thank you very much for that. Kashif, you got anything to say to this?
I think just to add to Pumlani, and because I suppose I'm an eternal patriot, the Brentus Foundation survey of March this year said that 57% of our country, of South Africans, approved the GNU, And I think somebody said it earlier, both the DA and the ANC's support increased because of the GNU. So I don't think anybody would want to step out of the GNU.
Yeah, I said that.
Yeah, you said, yeah. So I'm fertilizing your point, Pumlani, and so I think that the GNU, to a large extent, is good for our country because there's this checks and balances naturally in place. I think that it puts a bit of even more of a delay on policy implementation and policy certainty because there is no 51% majority. I mean, we saw budget vote Tara 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 going forward. Had it been a simple majority, the vote would have gone through and Bob's your uncle. So you're faced with this dichotomy of, do you want a GNU for accountability and transparency versus a party that governs and they say they're going over that hill and everybody goes over that hill and you get dragged with it whether you like it or not. And so that also gives you certainty. And so maybe the debate also today or later should be, if you compare the two, what is the better of the two for the challenge that we face as a nation?
Right. You're giving us topics for the future.
Or for now.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something, Tara?
No.
Okay. I've got a question, but this one is not directed to anyone. So any takers, and the question is, what mechanisms has the GNU implemented to combat corruption and how effective have these been? This is an open question. Anyone can have a go at it.
Maybe I'll start.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I don't think the GNU has put in any mechanisms to combat corruption which are new to what was there before the government of national unity. I think what it has done is, again, because of this eyes and ears from the opposition, it has made, I'd like to believe, it has made corruption more difficult to do. I think if you look at our newspapers on a weekly and a daily basis, somebody somewhere is caught for corruption. So the GNU hasn't put in place mechanisms, but it certainly has put corruption on top of the agenda because the opposition parties together, which was the majority party for 27, 28 years, are now doing it collectively. And I think there are more eyes and ears on each other right now.
Anybody else? Tara?
I think when looking, I do think that the GNU in itself has not implemented anything. I think that's a very, very fair statement. I do think, though, that specifically when we're looking from a legislative perspective, I think that, and I mentioned this earlier when looking at the lack of opposition, I think that is also something that we talk about, South Africans get the government that they vote for, but they also get the opposition that they vote for. And I do think that that is something that I've seen when examining the current political state, is just the fallout of opposition from just a legislative perspective, but also when we're looking at a national political perspective. I don't think that it is as important to have a robust opposition as it is to have mechanisms within the current government to hold itself accountable. And I think when we look at the internal struggles that are happening within MK, when we look at the internal struggles happening within the EFF, unfortunately, the other outlier parties who don't fall into the Progressive Caucus nor the GNU, the Action SAs, the South Africans, the ACDPs, they are just unfortunately too small to kind of take on these large-scale corruption issues and cases. Like, it's expensive to go to court. I know the DA makes it look quite easy being in court every other week for various different issues. But when you look at the key role that the DA played during their time as opposition in the Zuma years, specifically in the commissioning of the Zondo Commission, when we look at the key cases that had led up to that, they played a pivotal role as the opposition, and I unfortunately don't think that we have it currently in this GNU era. And I do think that that is also more of a difficult dynamic to navigate now that the DA is still in government. And even though they're kind of like opposition internally, it's vastly different from having a robust opposition standalone.
Thank you very much. Okay. Did we hear from Mr. Majosi on this one? No.
No. I was trying
It's
to
not-
hide. No,
It's not you. You're hiding in the open. So.
No, I won't hide. There is no question I would avoid from you, Professor. So, I mean, I think I would agree with fellow panelists. Nothing of substance, right, concrete, we have seen over the past year. What I would, my overall, Professor, my observation with the GNU is that other than the statement of intent that Tara has mentioned, which itself was very generic, right? I would argue it was key priorities of what we want to prioritize as the government of national unity. Very, very generic. There hasn't been any sort of concrete policy program, whether it's in economic reform or combating corruption or, various things. We haven't seen that. In fact, the Operation Vulindlela is President Ramaphosa's economic reform. I think he established that in 2021, 2020, so somewhere there, with tackling, economic reform. And they are going into phase 2 now, Professor, and it's a program of the administration before May 2024. They are continuing with it, right? It's not a new program. There hasn't been any massive reform program that we have seen under the GNU. And that has been my concern, by the way, that I haven't seen anything new in terms of a package of policy program under this GNU. And I hope that this can come through in future. We should help in tackling the corruption matters as well, or fixing our governance.
Right. Thank you very much for that. You see, you had to come out and speak. So we appreciate that. As we are counting down to the end of our webinar, I do have a question, and I'm going to ask each one of you to give us your take on this. Basically, this is your scorecard, so far for the GNU. Specifically, how would you assess the GNU's performance in promoting transparency and accountability since its inception? And you're not going to use the Likert scale. I need some narrative from you. What is your assessment of the GNU's performance in promoting transparency and accountability since its inception? Let me go by the list I have. I think, Tara, I've been a bit unfair to you. I've been asking you to start all the time. So maybe you can take a break. Let me ask Mr. Wickham. Kashif?
No, thank you, Prof. How would I score transparency and accountability?
Yes.
The government of national unity, by virtue of the fact that it is a coalition, promoted transparency. Because like I said earlier, it was no more the ANC sitting in a Wednesday cabinet meeting deciding what can and cannot be shared to the South African public and the South African people. So certainly transparency is there, and we've seen it come out in various forms and fronts. For example, I must add, with regards to accountability, and I don't know whether this was a GNU consequence or not, colleagues and professor, but if you look at how the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, the chairperson, dealt with the Minister of Higher Education, who was a comrade of his and a colleague of his, and how that independence came through in a way where we will keep you, where the Portfolio Committee kept that minister accountable, notwithstanding the fact that there could have been political alliances between members of the Portfolio Committee and the minister in this particular instance. So certainly, I think transparency and accountability amongst themselves, accountability to the nation at large, is better than what it has been prior to the government of national unity, because of the concept of coalitions, and where they had to keep each other accountable in order to ensure that when we go to elections going forward, they get the most votes. I think also what has happened, the African National Congress as a ruling party since the turn of democracy in 1994 had a rude awakening when they dropped to 44%. And they're having even a ruder awakening now where they have to fight not to increase the 51%, but to retain the 44%. So in the spirit of survival and in the spirit of continuing to be the largest party, and for the smaller parties who now know it is possible that I can co-govern, it is possible that a party that's got 2 members in parliament can actually be in cabinet. If you think about it, so transparency and accountability. I'm not saying it's a consequence of that, but certainly it's being promoted because of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. You talked about, you mentioned ruling party, and it took me back to one of my classes where I talked about ruling party, and one of the students said, no, this is a democratic society. This is democracy. We don't talk about ruling party. We say governing party. We're always learning also, from our students. So when you mentioned ruling party, I thought, okay, but then you said governing party as well. So great. Thank you very much for that. And I think, let me ask now, Tara, you caught in the middle now. Can we go to you and get your take on this one?
Absolutely. I think, if I have to give the GNU rating, I think I'd probably give them like a 5. Like, I think they're doing okay. I wouldn't say that it's anything extraordinary and so miraculous, that we need to absolutely rave about it. But I think when we look at the GNU currently, I don't think that anything remarkable is happening. And I think for many South Africans, because we were so used to the Zuma years where very little was happening and there was virtually no transparency about what was happening in government, and we only had to find out after the fact. I think that now that the government is doing what we really do see as almost the bare minimum of just performing what we expect from a democracy in everyday tasks and functions, that now suddenly it seems like they're performing miracles when they're really not. And so I think I would give them a 5. I think that there's definitely room for improvement. And I'm hoping that improvement will come very soon.
So this is a 5 out of what? Out of
5 out of 10. About
okay.
out of 10.
You are hard. Okay, so 5 out of 10. Mr. Majosi now, it's your turn.
It's my turn, Professor. It's what I have seen is that we've seen more pressure on the ANC, right? I could look at things like the budget, the debate over the VAT, when it comes to whether it should be increased or not increased. So that was a massive debate. We've seen of where the Democratic Alliance said, look, if you don't tackle or don't deal, Mr. President, if you don't deal with the ministers who are accused of corruption, we are not going to vote in some of the budgets, right? We saw Ngabane being fired recently when it comes to higher education and other people as well that the president has been dealing with. So I think that pressure, the DA pressuring, and other parties, by the way, pressuring the ANC, I think it's becoming more stronger, right? So we are seeing changes and the ANC experiencing that pressure. A very disappointing research published this month by the Human Sciences Research Council that shows that people profess that the levels of trust toward the police in the country is at a very, very low level, right? That's what the recent research shows. So that gives us a challenge in terms of how do we fix our institutions. Trust even in our institutions in general, they are still low. So for me, I would say that over the past year, I think that I just think much of what's been happening has been talk, right? And it's been very vague. There aren't really concrete plans as to this is what needs to be done. So I would argue that there's much more work to be done, in my view. Something serious and consequential must be done to address our governance and accountability.
Great. Thank you very much to all of you for this lively and I think timely discussion. Before I wind up, I would like to just say, if anyone has got something that they would like to add to what has been discussed so far, you might have some thoughts that you'd like to put on the table. This is an opportunity to say what you would like to just add before we wind up. Anyone?
Yeah, Prof, I can add one thing, right? And that is also how we think about this GNU and how we are being governed in this new era of our politics. We should also think about, yes, we may like the idea of coalition governments and the GNU. We may have positive views about it, as Kashif was citing the Regenesys poll, and as I said, that most people they favor the coalition government. But also you should think about outcomes in terms of economic well-being, right? Are the lives of South Africans improving, right?
Yeah.
Whether we are seeing joblessness going down, we are seeing criminality going down, we are seeing good educational outcomes. Is the well-being of our people improving? I think that should be really the measure of how we move forward instead of this nice way of governance. That's what I would add, yeah.
Okay, right. Wonderful.
If I can add,
Yes.
to that, a message to our learned colleagues and students who are online is to encourage that civil society and South Africans don't subcontract the running or the success of this country only to our politicians. We must keep our politicians accountable, yes, like we are, but must also roll up our sleeves and come up with solutions within the circles of influence that we are sitting. I use this example often. As a parent at the school, I can't complain in Feb that how can the school increase the fees by 10% from last year to this year, when I was not at the meeting where this vote took place. And so if you use that as a microcosm, South Africans must start to get off from their lazy butts and participate in the organizations and in the communities from which they come, be it a church, a mosque, a synagogue, a school governing body, the local rugby club where your children play rugby at, or netball, whatever the case may be, in order to ensure that the decisions that are made reflect you, and if not, you try your best in order for it to do so.
Good advice. Good advice. Really appreciated this concept or notion of participation. We try as Regenesys to engage with the community. It's one of the three legs of academia. So teaching and learning and research and community engagement, because we believe that through community engagement we give back, but also just what you have said, colleagues here have got different skills, different experiences, and what more can you do better than contributing to your community, your skills? The institution contributes its facilities, for various community engagement activities. So I resonate with the point that you have just made. I think it's a valid point. Okay, have I covered everybody? Anybody that wants to say the last word? Okay, and if not, then it's just up to me to really thank you, our esteemed panel, and all the students, alumni, the public, ladies and gentlemen out there, and for being part of this webinar. As I said, we'll be having more webinars, in the near future. So time is always jealous, but all is well that ends well. On behalf of the School of Public Management here at Regenesys and the entire Regenesys community, I would like to thank you for being up to the task, for keeping us excited, for unpacking this sort of novel development in our country. And I hope that our students certainly have found it informative. And I look forward to welcoming you, maybe on different panels in future, but let's keep the conversation going. And I just want to thank you very much. And please stay safe. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Professor.